Listen up, I'm about to get dope.
What's going on? It's time for another episode of Too Hard for the Radio, transmitting from the future free state of Idaho. I am the one-armed madman. And from his comic book shop, we've got with us tonight the Principaled Anarchist, Mr. Michael Strom. Mike, thanks for coming on.
Oh, man. I tell you, what's going on? What a question. Let's see. Is it the car that needs work on? Is it the other car that needs work on? Is it the thousands and thousands of comic books that need to be sorted? Is it the myriad of thoughts about liberty and injustice and a better world that are going through? Man, it's all going on.
Right on. So I figured we could start out by getting into some anarchism here. So when I was a kid, I remember I was probably like 10 years old. My parents were young. They didn't know anything about politics, but we lived next to my grandparents. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, and he watched a lot of Fox News. So I asked him one time, I said, why are we Republicans? And he goes, I was a dirt bike rider. I was riding dirt bikes since I was 4 years old. And he goes, the Democrats are the ones taking the trails away. They don't want you riding. They're going to take away your guns. And, they just outlawed snowmobiles in Yellowstone. He just gave me a whole list of things. And I go, okay, that makes sense. I can't stand these people. So obviously I'm a Republican. Mm-hmm. And, 9/11, I'm like a sophomore in high school. So I was into fighter jets. I love machines. I was a motocross racer. So, the military's cool. Look at these jets. The recruiters are coming around, getting us all jacked up. And I was going to go to the Air Force and head on over there and blow some people up. But luckily I tore my knee up and they wouldn't take me. And,
luckily, isn't it sad that you have to say luckily?
I know. And, it wasn't until I was in my 30s until I got into the internet. I was never into the internet as a kid. I started getting into liberty, and I found some people that were just talking my language. And I thought back on it and I go, he never answered my question. Why are we Republicans? All he said was why we're not Democrats. And that was
not quite the same thing.
Yeah. So how did you get into this?
Probably the response of somebody who doesn't really know why he is. There's just a handful of chosen issues. It's a little selective outrage that he's managed to find over the years. And my parents were the same way. No real concept of what's going on in the world. Not lacking in understanding or caring necessarily, but just not involved in it. Too busy going to work 9 to 5, trying to put food on the table.
Yep, same. It's a sad state. And like looking back on it now, like I've talked with my parents about this. I'm like, we were never Republicans. We were always libertarians, at least. Like, what I got married to a Persian woman in my late 20s, and I hadn't gotten into like libertarian literature or anarchism or anything like that yet. But when it finally, like when I got into this stuff right away, I was just like, oh yeah, this war machine is just a horrible thing. And then I found out what a Persian was, and I divorced her. So just to be clear, like
Okay.
I'm kidding.
Man, it's weird. I find myself questioning. I think it's one of the best things that I can do. I find myself questioning myself and my understanding of people, because I overestimate people and I underestimate people, and sometimes I just hit them right on. And I sit back and I try to think real hard why if people make certain political decisions or movements that they or lack of them that they do, and I finally get that they don't know. They don't know why it is they do what they do. They've just been taught that this is the system. This is the way it works. You're either on side A or you're on side B, or you're with those weirdos over there in those other parties, which those super effective parties that themselves are already factionalized and fractionalized within themselves. And, they've already left these major parties, the two big parties, and drifted over to libertarianism or Green Party or something like this. And these people are already disaffected voters. They're already people who have failed to realize change through the biggest actors in the system in the Republican and Democratic parties and have failed. And so their answer is to go to a third party that barely gets recognized,
Yeah.
and they're going to do even less. I think the least you can do for change. I mean, this is literally the least you can do is just show up at the polls and hope somebody else does something for you.
Yeah. I mean, I live here in Idaho and we're so ready for change. I mean, Ammon Bundy ran as an independent here this year and he outdid the Democrat. And I mean, there's a lot Brad Little didn't even advertise. He didn't do anything. No signs, no bumper stickers, nothing. All he just had to show up and win because there's that majority of people that are too afraid to go a different direction because they are afraid the Democrat might win.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's one of their favorite tactics,
Yeah.
right? If you don't vote, if you vote for that third party, those weirdos, those green guys, or something like that, that you're taking away votes that would go to one party or the other, and you're ensuring that the other person is elected. And I don't do math that way. That's not how math
Yeah.
works. That's the same argument that they make for a lot of this digital rights management
Yep.
trying to claim that sort of
Digital
Bob
copyright
in
bullshit.
Idaho who downloaded a
Yeah.
file has actually damaged somebody. That they are owed something because he downloaded a file and watched their movie.
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous notion. There's no connection between the two things. Just because I watched this movie doesn't mean that you were going to get the money in the first place. Just because I'm a part of this party doesn't mean that you're going to get the vote in the first place. At least a principled voter would say that, I would think.
People really just don't understand property rights and how they extend. Like you can tell them, look, this is your house, and they understand that. But once like I love bitching about my HOA. I have an HOA that I'm a part of, and we'll go to these HOA meetings, and they hate me. They fucking hate me. I'm a thorn in their side, and they'll complain about these Democrats. They're just wrecking the country. They're gonna gender and the whole list of everything that people are rightfully, justifiably upset about. And then the meeting will start, and they'll be like, "Okay, we're forming an architectural committee. So when you build a new building in your yard, we need to come inside and inspect because we need to know if it's a barn, a pole barn, or a structured building." And it's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like we're just complaining about this on the macro level, but we get down into the neighborhood. And the wild thing is it's all about bumping their property value a little bit. And it's like,
Right.
dude, our property values went up like 60% during COVID. You're
Oh,
really
wow.
going to bitch about my yard?
Yeah, it's one of those catch-22 things with the HOA thing, and there's agreements, and then when agreements turn into bullies and people trying to place value on things or create value where there isn't
Yes,
value, or
exactly.
that's where the problem becomes, and that's the underlying problem of government and authority, right? Is
Yeah.
that we keep falling into the same pattern, even in smaller groups. But it's less damaging to the individuals and to the groups if you keep it in that smaller group. If you shoot for that smaller management system, it just blows my mind when people talk about how wonderful or fantastic it must be to own a Microsoft or a Tesla or something like that. The companies, the
Yeah.
corporations, to be the person that's in charge of these things. And to me, that just seems antithetical to a peaceful, happy existence. Because the more money you have, the more people you have employed under you. All this, that's the less time you get to spend worried about yourself. And the bigger it gets, the less control you have over it individually, and you get something akin to these large corporations. You
Yes.
get out of control government. You get things
Yes.
that are just
And
too big, and we're trying to micromanage things on a macro scale.
and this leftist like form of thinking that it's all the corporations, it's all the big they're greedy, they're stealing our money, and they don't realize that it's the big state and the big corporation love each other. They feed off each other. I just finished a degree, which is a story all on its own from a local college here, and I did not realize the extent of the corruption in the education system with Microsoft. So to get a business degree at this school, you have to pass a class on Microsoft. Then you have to pass classes that require you to use Microsoft. So Microsoft used to be, you remember in the 90s, it was, oh my God, a monopoly, they're taking over. What happened to that? They paid a ton of money on lobbying and they got rid of all that talk. Now they're bigger than ever. They have more control than ever. And it's still capitalism is the problem. The statist line of thinking, like it's baked into us. My co-host Nolan on our normal episode, he's really into like liberty and this stuff, but he still just thinks like a statist, and it's just baked into us through the education system. And you know, man, we were just reading Greek tragedies, and one of them's Antigone. Antigone goes against Creon, who lays down the law, you can't bury your brother, and she buries him anyways. And it's amazing to see the people go, well, I understand that she wanted to bury her brother, but the law is the law. And I'm looking at this like, dude, this guy's out of control. And then the next place, he gets even more out of control. And then you see these people switch over from, well, now, he's just out of control. It's like, no. You have to stop it at the beginning. You can't let it go 1 inch, because by the end of the third play, it's a complete disaster.
Yeah, it's gone too far. It's that give an inch, take a mile thing, and people just don't see it. We're going through an accelerated version of it right now with the war, and the wars on terror, and the wars on homelessness, and the wars on gender,
drugs,
and the war. I don't know.
Families.
It's just an over and over endless parade of reasons to force other people to either be in some space or be in some space inside their mind, with the suggestion. This is what it just drives me nuts. All this weird leftist activism that is occurring right now, where they're constantly asking us to recognize them and accept them for who they are, but they goddamn well will not recognize that we are who we are and accept us for who we are. We're suddenly an enemy when we were never an enemy. I'm in the perfect, if you want an example of this, I'm right in the perfect place for it, because comic books are one of these areas of, comic books, video games. You've heard about Gamergate and all this stuff. Yeah, sure. So that this insidious movement, whatever it is, this agenda is finding its way into every facet of the culture. And what you have here in the comic book industry is the same as anywhere else, same as it's always been. When you're really truly on the inside of it, you realize that it's as open and honest, and there's a place for everybody inside of it if they're looking for it. That's always been the comic book industry. The comic book industry is inclusive. The comic book industry is divisive and derisive, and it's all of these things that they started, printing the materials because you couldn't get it somewhere else. You couldn't see these things. You couldn't hear these ideas, and so we have this agenda come in, and over the last few years, you have the gay Superman and the handicapped Spider-Man and all of these characters, which, fine, whatever, if that's what you want, if that's what people really want, but that's
they
not
don't.
what. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be. It seems.
You're all good, dude. We're partying.
I have a group of people that come in every week, and we talk about these things, and they say the same things that I think that is the real answer to this, and it's not pandering to a particular subset when that already existed. You're telling me there were no black characters in comic books before Black Panther came along just a few years back? No, sorry.
Not the case.
That's not the way it works. There's been fantastic, amazing black characters all throughout the history of comic books. Black creators all throughout the history of comic. And that you come to, oh, well, it's not inclusive enough. No, you're not inclusive enough. You haven't opened up enough of your world to realize that there's a bigger world out there. You're actually, these people are just hyper focused on themselves, narcissistic, and some of them mentally deranged.
Yeah. I'm a big Larry Niven guy, and Larry Niven was great at like solo explorers, figuring things out on their own, ingenuitive, capable. And every time the government would come in, they would mess things up. And this was, some of the most classic sci-fi series, like Ringworld is an incredible series. But what happens in 2016? There's a big, I think it was Vice article, Larry Niven and how he got Donald Trump elected. And it's like, surprisingly, like I'm a big sci-fi guy. I read a ton of sci-fi. I love Dennis Taylor. He's a new guy. What's Alistair Reynolds? And they're not doing any of this crap. They're still putting out good content. And I'm surprised. Like every time I go to a new series of book, I go, is there going to be bullshit? And I'm primed for it because I can't even watch. I can't even watch TV anymore. It's unwatchable, a lot of it. I mean, I can't do another female superhero movie on Netflix. It's just not my thing, But these books
Paper
are still
Girls
kicking.
At least
No.
No. Well, wait, that one's on Amazon Prime.
Which one?
It actually was really good.
Which one was it?
Actually, a very good comic book television show.
Which show? I didn't
Paper
hear
Girls.
Paper Girls. Yeah, no, I haven't seen that one. I'll have to check it out.
I'm
always looking for good
season,
stuff.
so you don't have to invest much in it.
Yeah, I'm always looking for good stuff. Have you looked into Eric July and his new comic book series? I think.
Yeah, I've looked into it. It's not something that is in any of the mainstream stuff, so you got to kind of go out of your way to get it. I'm kind of surprised that somebody around here. I'm in Kansas.
Okay.
So I'm kind of surprised that somebody around here hasn't actually asked about it. It just seems, I assume a lot of people around here know who Eric July is.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time where somebody like that who is creative and who has an audience can do something without a publisher, without the man. They don't need any gatekeepers to let him in. He's just already primed. Like, I know I can sell to my people, and if it's good, they're going to buy it and they're going to tell their friends about it, and more people are going to buy it. I think it's just a great story of like creating value. Like, here, I'm good at something. I know I'm good at something. He's a fan of all these things. And like you, he's critical of what's going on and is able to actually give an answer instead of just being like so many talking heads on the internet complaining about something and not actually doing anything to fix it.
Well, I think so often the people that are talking on the internet, which, it's funny to talk about talking when you're a talker. And when you're somebody who participates in it, but there's a level. There's here and there's here and there's here, and both some of us are working up here and talking about what's the Eleanor Roosevelt thing, right? Talking about ideas, not talking about people and events. That higher level thinking that's going to bring about change, that's going to resolve problems, that's going to get us to work together to solve the things that we need to solve. That's that higher level thinking up there when you're talking about the ideas. And I've run the gamut of this. I was down on the ground in 2011 for Occupy, literally dodging the pepper spray bullets and cops on motorcycles trying to run us over in the park. Just to be a part of it, just to see what was going on and to document it. And then I became involved with We Are Change for a little while.
Oh, right on.
We Are Change, a big group in Colorado. And spent a couple of years just kind of hanging out and building family and growing gardens and in neighborhoods and holding weekly meetings and potlucks and just generally building a community. But none of it really, it could never go anywhere because, again, you have the outside. We're an outside group, and we're an extremely diverse group when you're talking about people who fly an anarchist banner. If you
Yeah.
ask somebody about anarchism,
It's a spectrum.
you probably get, I don't know, you got green and you got red and you got yellow and you get, I think there's a blue one. And
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's wild. I mean, for me, like I was so primed for this stuff because when I started hearing people talk about it on the internet, it's like, oh man, this is the type of stuff I've been saying my entire
Mm,
life. Like I worked in the restaurant industry for like 10 years. And man, it's funny to like see how the market actually works in a restaurant because it's a
mm,
true meritocracy. So like you're always having problems with your hostess. They're the youngest there. They have the least experience. They have no idea what they're doing, and they think that they should be paid far more than they're actually paid.
right.
And I'm bartending, and I deserve this, and complaining and and then they get promoted to be a waitress, and they go, my gosh, the work that you have, the things that you have to memorize. Like I didn't know what I didn't know. And then they complain that they have to tip the bartender because why does the bartender get more money? And it keeps going and going. And I remember hearing the minimum wage argument and just telling like our waitresses and everybody was jacked up about it. It's like, yeah, well, people are gonna get fired. You know, don't worry, it's not gonna work out.
Yeah, one of those turnover industries where it's really obvious to see the effect that manipulation of the market and money
Yep.
has on those places. Yeah, we saw it. One of the largest hit groups in the world were the restaurants,
Yep.
and that market here the last couple of years through this COVID nonsense and all these lockdowns that basically have only told me that there's no chance
Yeah.
anymore. I don't know if anybody else was paying attention, but if
Yeah.
they can shut down everything and threaten you with murder and cages and at will over fake science, then Katie, bar the doors.
Yeah, paid for science. I'm structuring my life at this point. Like I've been on workers' comp for the last 8 years since I got hurt. I got an extra 3 years out of them because I'm a pain in the ass. So good on me. But I'm structuring my life in a way that I'm never going to be hindered by something like that when it does
Mhm.
happen again. I'm renovating a room in my house. I'm turning a dining room into a bedroom so I can rent it out, and I'm going to be paid off and I'm going to be able to go and, teach kids how to ride dirt bikes and maybe do some consulting in restaurants and work
Nice.
in ways that I will be dependent on myself. Like I'm not going to be, if I would have still here's how things change. In 2011, when you were at Occupy Wall Street, I was living in San Francisco and I was bartending
Mhm.
on Pier 39, and there was a big like homeless encampment at the Embarcadero BART station, and they had Occupy Wall Street signs up, and they were just basically camping. They had fires going, they were cooking food, like it was a mess. And if you asked 10 citizens walking down there, what are these people doing here? They'd be like, I have no fucking clue.
Mhm.
I was in a class, I took an English class there at the City College of San Francisco, and I didn't sign up for classes early enough. And the last English class available was called Women's Studies English. And me being a moron, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I didn't
Mhm.
even know what feminism was. And at that time, the big argument that I got into in the classroom was, is beauty a social construct? Like none of this gender shit, nothing. I never saw a trans person. Never even heard of a like they were still called transvestites back then.
Mhm.
And things change quick. This wheel just seems to churn and churn and churn and always left. It's churned to the point now where Elon Musk, the billionaire who believes in fucking social wealth, or what does he call it? Universal basic income, and lives off
Mhm.
of government money, is now right wing. It's a
Yeah,
disaster.
well, and only in a very superficial way. What was
Yeah.
the Twitter guy? The guy that you just hired for Twitter is a WEF, the World Economic Forum guy. It's the good old boy story again. You talking about just sort of being young and being who you are. So I've always been an anarchist, but I didn't necessarily always know the real philosophy of anarchy. I think
Me
when I
neither.
was younger, it was about sort of being angry and raging against the machine.
Yeah.
Metalhead, pot smoker. Listen to, I came up in the 80s, so you want to talk about something that applies, that is really sort of funny when you see government manipulations or the threat of it, change in industry. The music industry
Yeah.
is one of those. The comic book industry is one of those. Both of those are industries where they had to, the government started,
Yeah.
the kids.
Excuse me.
Somebody got to do something for the
Yeah.
kids.
Oh
You
my
save the
goodness.
children.
Put the stamp on the CD. Parental guidance.
Yeah, right. Well, that's what they had to do. The PMRC comes along, Tipper Gore. They lobby government for controls, because people in control get to make money, and they get to make rules, and they get to make other people do things. And so what had to happen was they had to, these industries had to go and self-regulate. And as a music guy, hardcore music guy, everything, classical music, rap, country, fuck it, you name it.
Yeah,
I don't
me
care. If
too.
it's a good song, it's a
I'm a
good
music guy.
song. That's all there is to it. I've listened to radio. I've loved radio. I've spent a lifetime in radio, literally 30 years doing this shit. And I've watched the changes. I was there in 1995 when they came into every studio in America and put in a little box that would take over the radio station and broadcast what they want. I was there. I grew up in the 70s and the 80s when you could still hear the Who say, "Who the fuck are you?" on the radio, and you can't hear that now. But I can listen to an Eminem song where they can have graphic descriptions of a guy lying in his bed and shooting himself in his head, but they beep out the part about Pan's tits.
Yeah. It's crazy. And back then it was the Republicans going after free speech. I don't think people remember that. This thing, it waves. So this podcast is called Too Hard for the Radio because there was a local rapper named Mac Dre in the Bay Area where I grew up, and his most famous, well-known song is called Too Hard for the Radio, and it's because he could not get any radio time. And he was so fucking good that he was able to actually change culture in the Bay Area. Ghost riding the whip. He started that shit. Like,
okay.
It's wild that people, I was just listening to Jelly Roll on Joe Rogan, and it's wild to see these people who are finally like figuring out how they're able to use new media to get to new people and to just have people listen to their. It's so crazy. Like when I was a kid, man, you had to drive down to the Best Buy or the record shop and buy the CD. And it was hard to listen to the music even, if your parents were around, they didn't want you to listen to shit. Now, man, people got music all over the place. It's a great, like, man, if they would just take the brakes off of it, like you said, get the government regulation out, get rid of, you don't even have to get rid of these big record companies. You just let everybody play fair and get their music out fair way and let the market sort it out.
They end up getting rid of themselves. They make themselves obsolete. Metallica is kind of a little bit of proof of that. Finally, over the years, they finally, this last album that just came out, they didn't hit the Billboard chart like they have for 32 years or some shit. And part of that, I think, is because they're still of a mind of this traditional radio mentality, and I don't know, people like me still remember them being against a new paradigm in transmission instead of embracing it and taking it into their own and making it what they would now. Lars is still on the wrong side of that argument.
Yeah,
it's still on the wrong side of that argument.
Just can't figure it out. It's crazy. All right, speaking of crazy, let's get into some news. Okay. So we have a constitution in this country, right?
So I hear.
Quote, were you expecting us? ATF agents go door to door to confiscate FRT 15 triggers. But what about the Constitution?
It's a good question. I don't think there's any such thing anymore. There's certainly not one on the state level, and I can speak to this quite personally on multiple occasions. There are 100,000 or more people every year prosecuted under some bullshit law. It depends. There are different
Yep.
variations of it in every state and every county across the nation. There's 30,000 gun laws on the books, maybe more by now. Just so many of them that ultimately these are ways to cool gun ownership and for the state to maintain its monopoly on force. People are prosecuted for defending themselves without even having fired a shot at somebody, just because they had a gun, not because the other person didn't start it, not because the other person isn't guilty by their own laws, their own codes and rules of assault. Because somebody else has greater force, particularly a gun, the state goes after. There's no Second Amendment right. There's no rights. There's just what you can fight for.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I had this babysitter, and they didn't own any weapons. And one night, some migrant that was hopped up on PCP snuck into their house and tried to rape her in bed. The husband got into a fight with him. The guy beat his head in with a fire poker. There was next door neighbors, and this is out in the country. There's no cops around here. Out in the country, their next door neighbors is an NFL football player, Army Ranger, and an electrical lineman. Big, tough guys. They hear a commotion. They run over there. It takes 3 of these guys to hold this dude down. The cops show up and go, "Why didn't you shoot him?" What they go, "We couldn't hold him down. We couldn't get to the gun." But that was the attitude back then. 20 years later, I am terrified of what would happen if I had to shoot somebody in my driveway in
If you
Idaho.
had to defend yourself. Oh no, absolutely. Yeah. We'll have to do a follow-up on this, maybe a month or 2 down the road, something like that,
Absolutely.
and I'll have another story for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and speaking of a monopoly on force, we've got from the UN Secretary General, peace talks not possible.
We're talking about Ukraine or something?
Yeah, talking about, sorry, I didn't set that up right, but
No,
isn't that peace talks are not possible? Like, to say that they're not even, it's so crazy that these people are so confident that they're going to get this war that they're not even considering peace. Like, you would think that a diplomat would just say, "Hey, look, peace is always what we're looking for." Like, there's always a possibility for peace. Like, it's just about how bad we want it. Something like that, but just, nope, not possible. This war's got to go. How do we end this thing?
I don't, man, you can't. There's no way to end it because all of these people are right and all of these people are wrong. Not us, the American government, not those guys. They're always wrong.
Oh yeah.
But as far as the sort of Ukraine and Russian sides of it, they each have their own individual points, and they're each absolutely valid points. With that monopoly on force that government controls, there's no. I don't see any place that it gets better. You said it yourself that it's sort of the ratcheting wheel. It never goes backwards. It always goes in one direction. And I like to think of a ratchet like that. And there's another more simple idea, and that's that it's all just a straight line. And there's on one end tyranny, and on the other end, anarchy. And everything in between is just some variation of socialism or a lighter form of tyranny. And so I think when you take that view of something like what is happening over there, that you lose any perspective on these people working in group still following the dictates of the state, as opposed to why did they break off in the first place? Why did any of Georgia, why the Ukraine, any of these places ever break off and become separate from the USSR if they weren't going to be free? And why did the USSR let them go if they weren't going to be free? And why are we still having this conversation all these years later? If it wasn't for NATO trying to put missiles in Russia's backyard, none of this would be happening. The Russians would have left the Ukrainians alone. They could trade across borders. You wouldn't have to worry about the fear of Germany getting involved because of their ties through their gas supplies and all these things that have been built up over the last 30 years or so of interconnected capitalism between the states and between the peoples of the states was the better way to go about this. And all it took was that we got ours is better, our thing's better. We're gonna put our missiles over here on this border, and don't worry about it. It's okay.
Yeah,
it's not really
they're just defensive missiles. You can't put offensive nuclear weapons on them or anything like that.
It's a really silly thing to me. I look at the status and I laugh a lot, and I laugh sort of inappropriately, like I did through the Joker.
Yeah, I like to tell people, imagine that you were in like a war with your smaller neighbor. It's a smaller house. They've got less money. Maybe their job's not, maybe they're not even working. And then Cabela's came in and sponsored them in that war. Like, you would be at war with Cabela's. Like, you're no longer at war with your neighbors. Like, dude, Cabela's is the real force here. The neighbor's just pulling the trigger. And now we've even got, like, a couple of months ago, I said on the show, in years down the line, we're going to find out that the U.S. behind closed doors always knew that Ukraine had no chance in winning this war. And like 2 weeks later, that leak came out saying exactly that. And it's like, man.
Yeah, their thoughts, the assessment on it. Yeah. You would think that Russia has the upper hand, but it's all propaganda, man.
You can't trust anything these people say.
Really been down on the ground in any of these places that they talk about, in any of these, especially inside the institutions, to understand how they're really organized and who is, where the funding is and what the condition of the equipment is. If we look at America and the piss poor way we manage wars and manage our equipment and manage our public services, how bad could it be? It's got to be horrible in Russia. So, I mean, maybe they don't really stand as good of a chance. I don't think that's the question that anybody should be asking. The question anybody should be asking is, why the hell are we doing it in the first place? Why once again is, and we already know the answer. Right? It's a pointless question because we already know the answer, and that's because the bankers, the warmongers, the manipulators, the people who make money living off the rest of us by either sucking the life directly out of us through our labor, our health, and everything else that they can get their hands on in any transaction that we make, but then also, getting us to work for their machine, sacrifice themselves. I can't imagine why any Russian would stand up and go, yeah, I'm going to go kill the people in Ukraine. Why? What was it again? Oh, well, I guess it was the missiles. I guess that's pretty reasonable. That seems like a good reason to defend your neighborhood, as if your neighbor got some missiles and was pointing them at your house and kind of go, no, don't worry about it, bro. It's all good.
Yeah. I mean, and they want to take this to Taiwan next. I mean, it's crazy. My hope is all right, look, they're pivoting straight from COVID to Ukraine. The people who were against COVID are going to see these are the same people just playing another game. But then Taiwan comes in and you got Sean Hannity. Oh my God, China, China, China. And, my hope was, hey, look, these people are going to see through this and stop sending their kids to die in these fucking wars. But I think, people around here, man, they love the military and they're just eager to send their kids over and die.
This town wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the military. This place would have dried up and blown away a long time ago. There's only 3 factories in the town that are really large-scale functioning factories. We got an M&M plant. We got a Doritos plant, or Lay's, I guess, and Goodyear. The Goodyear headquarters is here.
They've just
plant.
They've just destroyed small town America, completely destroyed it. Like all the plants, there was an MGM brake factory in the town I grew up in, gone. They've just completely destroyed Main Street. And, people didn't even see it coming. And you look around here, we've got Amazon going in and we've got the small Ace Hardware closing down. And it's a freaking nightmare. These people are so corrupt. They're so greedy. And like you said, they're just willing to throw people into the meat grinder like they're nothing. And people just disassociate from the fact that we're actually, like me, oh, look at how cool the fighter jets are. I'd love to go fight one of these things. And just completely disassociate from the fact that you're dropping fucking bombs on people. People are dying. Like, see this fucking hand? Like, there are kids over in, how many kids got their hands blown off in Iraq and Afghanistan that have no fucking medical treatment at all? I mean, they're living out in the fucking desert. If you're lucky, you're going to survive without an infection, but you're never going to have any sort of prosthetic. You're never going to have any sort of normal. The shit hurts. People don't think about what do these people do for pain? Nothing. Or they take heroin for their entire fucking lives, which is another reason why we're over there. This fucking drugs. I mean,
it just shows the interconnectedness of it all, and it proves the conspiracy. How many times are we going to be fooled by just saying, "Oh, that's a conspiracy"? Not so many times anymore. But here's the thing: who cares? That's the problem with it. Who cares? Because it doesn't matter if it's a conspiracy, because the shit happened last week. The motherfuckers already did it. They fucking got away with it, and nobody's ever going to fucking pay for it.
And they're already planning to do it again. They're just planning on doing it again.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're already fucking working on the next big. Yeah. Yeah.
How are we going to lock them down for climate change? Climate change, that's a big one. Like they haven't just completely destroyed Main Street. Like I was in the electrical industry. When I went to school, they told us that 50% of the entire fucking industry was within 10 years of retirement. I've got that in other books, like a Bill Gates pick of the month or whatever the fuck it was, saying 50%. And now they want us to build transmission lines for wind energy all over the goddamn country. We don't have the people to do it. And now you've got every fucking teacher, guidance counselor, TV show saying, don't be a knuckle dragger. Don't be some idiot and break your back working construction. Go be a techie. Learn to code. Do all that shit. Meanwhile, we're not going to have the people to build the energy to keep these fucking tech companies going. And when the rolling blackouts come, you better believe that Google is staying on.
Oh, yeah. Well, Google's probably, in that sense, probably pretty smart, because I imagine that they powered a lot of their own stuff. They've taken a lot of their own money and powered their own stuff. Well, if people would take some of these cues from these big businesses and do what they do. When they invested in crypto, maybe you should have thought about investing in crypto too. When they invested in the future, maybe you should have thought about it too. It's not follow the money. It's just a truism. Those guys are going to go where the money is to be made, and they're going to go there with as much information and foreknowledge as they can get, as they could possibly have, to do it. So they're presumably, the ones that are successful, they're going to be ahead of the game. And if you're following them, you'll see the trends. You'll know if Google's building its own power supplies, if Apple's building their own city for people to work in and powering themselves. Maybe you should be thinking about it too, because they're obviously not trying to rely on a broken public system that was outdated 50 years ago.
We really need, like I've been saying for a while, like if I was in my fucking prime and I could do something, I would be finding a country that would let me build some sort of fucking factory. I don't know what. I'd find some other business partner that's building something. Maybe, some American made thing, American company, and we'd put it right over the border in Mexico, and we'd build a fucking nuclear reactor to power it and say, hey, look, we have got to stop with these, regulations. These regulations are killing the energy industry.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like, Google should be able to build a nuclear reactor to power their facility.
I mean, prefer they did.
Me too. I mean, Google should be on all the time. Like, I would prefer if Google didn't go down if Gavin Newsom makes bad decisions on energy. You know what I mean? But they're not going to let us do it. I mean, I think it should be as far as like my HOA should be able to buy a nuclear reactor and say, hey, look, when you move into our neighborhood, you have energy for 500 years. You can leave your kids this house and they're going to have free energy. You can start a business. You can do whatever from your home. You're always going to have energy. And that would be an amazing selling point in a house. You could buy property with, I've been telling, like, I've got a group of people that have moved up here from California and we've got a tight crew. I'm saying, hey, look, 20 years from now, we're going to go into Wyoming in the middle of fucking nowhere, and we are going to buy property and split 100 acres between 5 families, and we're going to have enough for us to keep building. We're going to have, your kids will be able to build a house. Their kids will be able to build a house. And
Nice.
we should be able to have our own source of energy so we don't have to rely on these monsters to keep the lights on.
Just like we should have our own currency, we should have our own food, we should have none of this stuff should be centralized outside any voluntary method of doing so. Obviously, as an anarchist, that we get this thing that anarchy is chaos, and that they think that no rulers means no rules,
Yes.
or that it even means no rulers. And look, it's about a voluntary system. It's about submitting to an authority versus being forced to submit to an authority, and doing so voluntarily, doing so willingly, doing so openly, and working together. I tell all the time that what you see around you is the willful result of people ignoring government regulation. None of this would exist if it wasn't for government, if it wasn't for trying to avoid government messing with it. All of the advances in encryption and computers and sending data and transferring information, all of these things have been developed in spite of government and in the light of government trying to take control of it all. And I think this is what we can do. This is what we do on the street every single day. It doesn't matter
voluntary
what color
transactions.
you are or what religion you are. None of that shit matters when it comes to the free market, the open market. And that means the open market of ideas. That means the open markets of money and energy and food and all of these. We live in a completely captured society. All the things that are important, knowledge, defense, self-interest, captured by Hollywood and turned into a pageantry and a television show. All of these things are controlled by a small number of people who have used the same tactics and the same systems and the same playbooks for a couple hundred years.
Since there's been
more to tell people.
There's been people trying to rob the production of others since the beginning of civilization. There's always been a group that says, hey, look, I want to sit around while other people work to support me. And it's transferred. Karl Marx finally put it onto paper, but it's the same story throughout history. You're productive, I'm not, and I want some of yours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And And government sees that as a way to keep and maintain power, because the natural tendency of a free nation, I would assume, would be to shrink the size of government. Everything shrinks. It's an economic certainty, an economic reality that as technology grows, as interest grows, investments, reinvestments in the core things that make stuff work, the costs go down,
Yep.
and so the usefulness of government would go down over time. And that's the thing that we're fighting against, is that they continue to monetize justice and monetize defense and for themselves, not for us, not in any sense of the word, not for us. It is for the class of people who get involved in it. And it doesn't, we're just the cattle that they prey on.
Yep. Prices fall to the cost of production. You know, prices should be falling, and they don't.
Yeah,
And people
that's
don't
the
understand
natural tendency
the
of
natural
things,
tendency
because
of the
people get
market.
smarter. They learn how to use it. They learn how to develop it in different ways. It's just like AI. We're watching this AI grow
Yep.
and change. And
Right now, it'll cost millions of dollars to run an AI, but 50 years from now, it'll be on your
nothing.
phone like a calculator app. You couldn't
Yep.
imagine paying for a calculator app right now. You'd be like, "Are you crazy? Why would I pay for a fucking calculator?" But at one time, that calculator app was really hard to make, and somebody put a
Yeah.
lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of time, sweat, and tears into that thing. But over time, prices keep falling. What do you think?
That's the natural tendency of things. So when
Yep.
you see prices going back up, you know there's government intervention, there's market manipulation, or there's money manipulation. But in this world, come on, they're both. There's
Yep.
no separation. There's no area of reality that we live in that isn't tainted by government, that isn't preyed on by those people using the rest of us to make a living.
Yeah.
It's an
The predator
insidious
class.
thought.
Yeah, there's a predator class. I
Yeah.
mean, look at Joe Biden. He's been, but what are they talking now? $10 million or something like that. He's gotten from overseas. These people have never had real jobs. I mean, going through college, the level of they teach to the level of the dumbest student, and there are some really fucking dumb students out
Yeah.
there. I mean, the last essay that I had to grade on somebody, I just ripped him because to me, it was offensive that I had put so much time into this thing. And then they put out something, the beginning sentence was like, history is what we talk about when events happened in the past. And it's like, this is what they're putting out. Like this is the predator class. This is how they actually, they don't understand any of this that we're talking about. They've never produced anything. So they don't know what it feels like to have your production stolen from you. They don't know. I remember as a kid, my dad showed me an overtime check. He was a lineman, and he'd been working up in the mountains for months. Snow. We're talking hard work. 80 hours on, 8 hours off for months at a time. He showed me this paycheck. It was, the government took like $40,000 from him in a single fucking paycheck. And I was just like, holy shit. And even as a kid, I could recognize that all of that time was taken for what? To steal my dirt bike from me, to take my gun away from me, to shrink the amount of land that I can go riding in little by little by little every year because of something like they claim erosion. It's like, erosion? So what, we moved dirt from one area to another a little bit faster and now we can't ride anymore? It's fucking crazy.
Yeah, I've heard that argument before. at least sometimes they stumble back asswards into making something work, making something play out the right way. But man, for the one time that it happens out of the 1,000 times that they just fuck everything up, it's not worth it. It doesn't seem to add up to me.
No.
It really doesn't.
All right. So when I first came across your deal online and I saw the Principled Anarchist, I go, ooh, that reminds me of something. And I dug around in my brain for a few minutes and I go, I got it. So I got a quote for you. I'm going to read this quote here and we'll see what you think about it. I'm probably going to butcher this because I just got new dentures. Here we go.
I knocked a tooth out here a month or so back that I gotta get
Oh,
replaced.
it's a nightmare. All right. A rational anarchist believes that concepts such as state and society and government have no existence save as physically exemplified in acts of self responsible individuals. He believes that it is impossible to shift blame, share blame, distribute blame, as blame, guilt, responsibility are matters taking place inside human beings singularly and nowhere else. But being rational, he knows that not all individuals hold his evaluations, so he tries to live perfectly in an imperfect world. Robert Heinlein from The Moon is a Harsh Mistress.
Yeah, I've come across some great Highland quotes in my day, and it always makes me wonder because one of the things that I'm a pop culture guy. I like music, I like movies, I like TV. I like video games. I enjoy those leisure things, and one of the things that I've found that it's just fascinating over time is the lack of understanding of influence that some of the people like the creators of South Park
Oh,
are one that always comes to me. They have no concept of what they have brought to the table in terms of changing minds and making people think critically about things like government and
yeah,
things like manipulation of speech and manipulation of money. I mean, they've
yeah,
even addressed that, and it's gone.
yeah. Yeah, man, they're such a huge influence on my life. I mean, as a kid, I was like 15 years old or maybe even younger when that show came out. And it was just like wild and in your face and just fuck you. We're not taking your bullshit. And yeah, man, just punk rock music. I was listening to the first album I ever bought was Offspring Americana. And you go back and I'm going to disregard what Offspring has done in the past years and
Yeah.
remember them how they were. You listen to that and you're like, "Man, these guys got it right." Rancid, these guys got it right. Things that were baked into my mind that I didn't understand at the time, but now listening back just going, "Oh man, that's right."
There's
Pennywise.
another one. That's another one. You say that, and I'm thinking early '80s metal, and I'm
Yeah.
thinking Dave Mustaine. I'm thinking Metallica,
Yeah.
Megadeth, Slayer, all
Ozzy.
singing about these really, they're singing about the cruelty and the manipulations of war, and they're talking about Megadeth, of course, peace sells, but who's buying? I mean, that's an entire goddamn anthem of anti-statism without knowing it, and just to see Dave Mustaine in particular to be just a status cuck
Yeah.
in his fucking old age.
It's so
It makes me
disappointing.
sad, and it just reinforces the idea that one, don't invest any fucking time in individuals when you're talking about creativity because their creativity doesn't necessarily reflect who they are, and you should not have idols. You shouldn't create idols out of these people, and that they don't have that. They don't have that concept of how they can truly influence people and what they've done. The thing that gets me is something like that with the Dave Mustaine, where it's so glaringly obvious
Yeah.
to come from such a sort of relative anarchist position. Obviously, one that they clearly didn't understand at the time,
Yeah.
and never did understand
Yeah.
because they never did come to understand it because they turned away from it. They didn't gravitate towards it to become such a status. And again with the South Park thing, if you watch them go back sort of a decade after the South Park movie, which the South Park movie was just
I
a
still
fucking
watch it once a
bomb.
year. Once a year, I watch it.
Yeah, it just boom. And I don't mean bomb as in
Yeah.
bad. I mean bomb as in boom, right in your fucking face.
Violence and
Here's the
destruction.
ridiculousness about your society that
Yeah.
we're holding this mirror up to at the time. They have no fucking clue.
Yeah.
They didn't even remember what the fuck they did. They had no idea what the jokes were. They barely remembered the song. They showed up and won their fucking Academy Award. They showed up in dresses and shit. That's what they remembered.
Yeah.
They remember bucking the system. They don't remember being an influence.
Murder and violence is okay as long as you don't use any dirty words. That
Fantastic movie.
Yeah.
First time I saw it, I was tripping acid. Saw it in the movie theater opening day. I was tripping balls. It was great. I enjoyed every minute of it.
All right, man. And on that, we're gonna get out of here. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a good night. Peace out.